All righty. Hey, Amy. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. It looks like we have a good amount of folks on already. If many of you saw, I hit record. So we'll be posting this to our Call for Projects website after, like I mentioned earlier. And we'll be posting the PowerPoint presentation there as well. So we will, if you haven't received the email from us, either make sure to follow up with me or we'll be sending out an email to all the participants after as well. With that, I will go ahead and share my screen and we can kick it off. Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Gilster, the manager of planning and programming with the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. We're here today to kick off our pedestrian and bicycle programs Call for Project. This is our cycle 6 period, which will cover fiscal years 23 and 24. As most of you know, this is a 2-year funding pot. So we host this Call for Projects every 2 years. A little bit about the larger program. We have 3% of Measure A is dedicated to bicycle and pedestrian projects, and a little bit larger, 5% of Measure W is dedicated to bicycle and pedestrian projects as well. All project funds must be used to encourage walking and bicycling. So walk, bicycling, rolling, accessing transit. We'll cover today the project application and guidelines and our evaluation criteria that were reflected in our strategic plan that was for 2020 to 2024. A little bit of our funding overview. We're a little bit unique this year in that we have some CAG funds joining us as well. So from the TA, Measure A, and W side, we have a total of almost $18 million available in the bicycle and pedestrian category from both Measure A and Measure W. 95% of our overall PED bike program is dedicated towards capital projects, which is then further split down into small capital projects, projects less than $1 million, or large capital projects, projects greater than $1 million. And we also have a planning and promotions category at 2.5% of the PED bike funds, and our Safe Routes to School funds on the TA side makes up the last 2.5% of our funding. And that's actually administered by the San Mateo County Office of Education that hosts a separate call for projects directly with schools and school districts. Cities looking to apply for Safe Routes to School funding, or the county apply to our capital projects or planning and promotions bucket, or CAG Safe Routes to School capital projects bucket. So CAG this year has kicked in an additional $200,000 in Measure M funding. And this will be for smaller capital projects for Safe Routes to School access, which I'll cover towards the end of this. So our eligible project types. So we have, as I mentioned, multiple project categories. We have our small project categories, which are any project phase requests under the $1 million amount, including matching funds. All phases of work are eligible for this, but if you are including planning, it does need to include beyond just the planning phase and leading into a capital project. The large capital project bucket, all phases again are eligible, and these are for any requests plus the matching funds over $1 million. So one thing to consider when we are talking about a project in terms of the TA, we are just talking about the phases you are requesting, not necessarily the overall project itself. So always happy to help with clarifications on that as you put your applications together as well. In our planning and promotions category, this can cover anything from active transportation plans, bike plans, PED plans, corridor and feasibility studies, to promotional activities such as bike to work day or safety events. In the last cycle, we had one application for those from Daly City for Vision Zero outreach. So excited to hopefully get more of those this year. We carried over some funds from that last cycle to this cycle as well. And then we have our Safe Routes to School bucket, as I mentioned, are allocated by the County Office of Education, but we will have that $200,000 in Safe Routes to School capital funds eligible in this cycle. Some key program guidelines to keep in mind for the Cycle 6 Pedestrian Bicycle Program Call for Projects. The TA does require a matching amount required to submit for a project. All project categories now meet our standard match. So if you remember in the past, the planning and promotions category used to require a 50% match. We have since gone back to our board and lowered that to be equal with our other programs to be consistent across the board. So that is now all of our categories have the minimum standard 10% match. New this year, and in alignment with our alternative congestion relief and transportation demand management plan that we adopted in January, we have also now adopted an equity-based match for our bike and ped program. And this allows you to use a reduced minimum match of 5% if your project or program is located primarily in either an MTC equity priority community, a CAG equity focus area, or a reimagined Samtrans transportation equity zone. And we have links to be able to figure this out and can help you do that as well. So we are both interested in identifying where projects can be implemented in these areas and reducing barriers to implementing those as well by reducing those matching funds. And then we have maximum project costs. So our maximum project award for capital and large projects is at $2 million per request. And then for small projects, it equals out depending on which match you use. For the minimum match would be $909,000 for the standard match, so that's using the 10% match, and then $952,000 with the equity-based reduced match. On the planning and promotion side, we've actually been able to also up this amount from the last cycle as well. You're now able to request a maximum of $100,000 for those, instead of it used to be $50,000. And similarly, as our previous cycles, the total awards for sponsors for the entire CFB is up to $5 million total. This goes hand in hand with our number of applications that jurisdictions are allowed to submit for. So any singular sponsor jurisdiction is only allowed to submit up to 3 applications per call for project cycle. I will add one clarifying thing to that we can talk about as well, is that that does not include any applications that are specifically for the CAG funding as well. So if you're applying for the TA funds, you can apply for up to those 3 plus 1 more for the CAG funding as well, for any project under $200,000. So eligible sponsors for our programs are the cities and towns within San Mateo County, the San Mateo County Government Agency itself, the City and County Association of Governments of San Mateo County, commute.org, the public transit agencies that operate in San Mateo County as well. So Caltrain, BART, Samtrans are our major ones. Some award conditions. So we wanted to cover this given where we're at in the current funding cycle and all the other grant awards that are going on as well. We understand that many of you are either in the process of or have just applied to many other potential program funding sources. So we want to help encourage by leveraging competitive grant program funding. So one of the things the TA is doing this cycle, since we will likely get through our awards a little bit faster than some of these other programs, is that all of our funding awards will be contingent on the outcome and any other competitive applications identified by the project sponsor. So if you have applied for the OBAG or RAISE or the ATP program, we will need to see the results from those before we'll be able to sign a funding agreement for these. And this is really to help make sure that any projects that can help get those larger funding buckets, utilize those, and we can spread the wealth around all of our cities and towns that may not be as able to compete for those. So projects listing competitive grant funding as matching to the TA fund. So if you're using it as leveraging specifically, if those funds are not received, the TA will then move the reallocate the awarded funds to the next highest eligible ranked project. And if your project is fully funded by an external competitive source, we will also move the funding to the next highest ranked eligible project as well. So the TA, we have a timely use of funds requirement as our guidelines for all of our categories. So in the planning and promotions category, you will have up to 2 years to use those funds for any of those activities. And on the capital project side, depending on if you're just requesting construction activities or any pre-construction activities, you'll have 2 years for those, the planning, PAD, PS&E phases, and then up to 3 years for construction activities. So we allow for a total of 5 years for if you're doing both types of activities. So a little bit about the application process itself. So Our call for projects was officially released at our TA board meeting last Thursday. We are hosting the workshop today with all of you to go over these requirements. And then new to this program, we will be offering optional pre-submittal eligibility meetings. So those will be required if you want to use the reduced equity-based match, or if you just have any general questions or want to review your project or go over some of the criteria as well. So you'll fill out that by filling out our notice of intent to submit survey. I'll go over at the end. There's 2 different dates that actually apply to this specific survey. The important one, though, is if you want an optional eligible pre-submittal meeting, please fill that out by August 19th. We will be checking our surveys on a rolling basis weekly till then, and starting to organize those. That just gives us ample time to be able to meet with you and go over questions appropriately. And then finally, our evaluation and awards. We will be looking, so applications will be due on September 23rd by 4 o'clock. So we will provide an upload link if you fill out the notice of intent to submit survey. Very similar to our last highway program call for projects and the ACR TDM call for projects as well. So no more submitting lots and lots of paperwork, giving it all in one place, reducing our impact on the environment. So we will then be reviewing our draft awards and looking at scoring those all through October, presenting the draft awards to the TA board in November, going back to the TA board for the final program adoption in December 2022. So by the end of the year, we should be all awarded. A little bit about the application process itself. Very important. We want to stress, please review the application's instruction document and the guidelines before you start. Just helps provide a step-by-step instruction about making sure you have all the right attachments, you've done all the right different little activities that you'll need to do with those, both online and to fill out. So you'll have to double check the appropriate application. So remember, we have 2 different applications. If you are doing a capital project or which may include any planning efforts, but those will be directly with the capital infrastructure application. If you are doing a planning only or promotional activity, you will use the planning and promotions application, which is for the non-infrastructure projects. Please note that some of the questions will have the TA staff fill in after you submit that are quantitative place-based metrics, similar to the metrics we have in our ACR TDM program, that will apply for some of the categories too here. So trying to reduce some of the level of effort that you'll have to put into here, and providing more apples to apples view of project locations across the board for all submitted projects. And as I mentioned, we have online tools that you'll have available to provide data that will also add to the quantitative scoring to help us look at things like the GHG reduction emissions and VMT reduction impacts. And then remember, you'll have to submit both the application and all attachments labeled appropriately, such as attachment A and then your city or your application title, to the project specific Dropbox that you will be provided. So as I mentioned, there's a whole host of different application materials that are available on our TA CFP webpage. So we have the guidelines there. We have both the capital and planning applications. They are Word formats in a fillable Word form, and then the application instructions. We have also provided both the evaluation scoring rubrics for the capital and planning promotions category. So for each question, you'll be able to see exactly what information you should be providing to get the maximum amount of points. We also have our sample governing board resolution. That's standard, that has our certification of the cost estimate and that the non-supplication of funds, and that allows you to enter into agreements with us. If your project is a partnership with an external nonprofit or an additional agency, please remember to double check that governing board resolution that you can enter into agreement with those agencies as well, in addition to the TA. So we've also added that to that draft as well. We also have the sample funding agreement if you are just looking for funding from the TA, and we also have a memorandum of understanding if we're looking for TA technical assistance to help you lead a planning effort or implement a potential project. To do that, you will need to reach out to me and host a And we'll have a pre-submittal meeting for that. And if it has anything to do beyond the planning effort, we will include our project delivery highway team as well. And then we will also be posting the workshop and PowerPoint recording of this as well. So submitted materials are all due by September 23rd at 4 p.m. like I mentioned, to a Dropbox link that you'll get separately after filling out the notice of intent to submit survey. In that, you'll need to provide at a minimum the application, the cover letter and resolution. Like many of our other programs, the resolution does not have to be adopted by the time you submit. It just needs to be adopted by the time we go to the final adoption in December. And then to execute an agreement, that will need to be in place. Any letters of support and document of community engagement should be provided as well. Site photos specifically, in the past, we've asked just for a Word doc with description. Please provide that and any of the raw pictures as well. That just helps us in creating any materials later or fact sheets for each of the awards. The attachment D is our call for projects portal zip file export. I will walk through what that looks like at the end. But the TA has recently updated our portal for that, and we now have it export all the information in one thing that you just provide to us, and we run the calculations for that. And then you'll also fill out, similar to the last cycle, the California Air Resources Board greenhouse gas reduction and vehicle miles travel impact form. Pretty simple form that we can go over as well, and attach a cost estimate either in your format or in the standard Caltrans format, which are all provided in the applications instructions as well. And then lastly, attachment G is the Safe Trek Transportation Injury Mapping Systems, ATP map and summary export. There's a step-by-step guide in the application instructions that helps walk you through how to do that for the specific project as well. That just makes sure we're looking at all the safety data equally for all of the projects. So a few application tips, like I mentioned, make sure to read the application guidelines and instructions before you begin. Make sure you click the correct application. Make sure the attachments are there and included in the checklist at the beginning of application. Again, incomplete applications will be rejected. We will try to work with you if we can prior to the 4 p.m. deadline. Please make sure to double check with us that we can see everything and that it's there. My colleague Jennifer and I will be more than welcome to help you with that. And then please assume and write your application as if you understand that the scoring panel is not familiar with your project and does not know the specifics. So assume we know nothing when we're looking at these. You'll use the available text boxes to fill in the responses. No specific limits are provided, but all of the text in those boxes must be visible. Any text we cannot see when we PDF the form will not be counted. And then each question related to the evaluation criteria is directly related to the evaluation criteria. So be clear and concise when writing your responses. And then again, as always with grants, make sure to submit your application on time. We cannot accept late applications in fairness to all the other applicants. So some quick guidance on the CAG portion. At the very end of the application, there's a new page from last time. These are a screen. These questions are not actually given any points. The points to evaluate the funding for the CAG ones will be the same points that we evaluate for all of the other projects. However, this will ensure eligibility for CAG's Measure M funding. So in general, it follows the same guideline requirements as our TA funding. It does not apply to the 3 application limit for the TA funding. Project requests must be less than 200,000. So CAG is looking for the smaller capital projects that can be funded by this. It does not have to be a $200,000 project if you have a $30,000, $40,000 RFP or something like that. All of those are eligible and use these screening criteria to hopefully identify where those should be located. So CAG is looking for projects identified in a pedestrian bicycle plan, a safe routes to school plan, or a walk audit, or some type of similar plan. And then projects must be located within half a mile of a public school and located on the CAG Youth High Injury Network as well. So links to that are also provided in the application. If you haven't reviewed that, please do so first. So to see if you have projects identified there as well. As I mentioned, we have a few different online tools that we use when doing our application. So we have the California Air Resources Board BMT GHG reduction calculator. In that, you fill in the main cover page and some subsequent information, and it will automatically spit out your passenger BMT and GHG emissions reductions. Those are the two numbers that get plugged into our application. And then the TIMS, ATP map, and summary data, you follow the step-by-step instructions on there and provide the map and summary data as an attachment. And then new this year, we have our call for project web portal. If you submitted to the HCR TDM program, this is the way the TA input this last time. But this time it will be up to each applicant to input this information, and I'll go through that at the end. So our evaluation criteria. So the scoring of each application question ties directly to a strategic plan evaluation criteria. We will host a evaluation scoring panel that includes TA staff, 2 representatives from the CAG BPAC, as well as a member from CAG staff, a member from Caltrain, and a member from Caltrans Bicycle Pedestrian Program team. So our application is broken out into 5 different sections. Each has a different total number of points: need, effectiveness, sustainability, readiness, and funding leverage. And it will walk you through kind of how all those points add up to a total of 100 points. There are different questions that apply to the non-infrastructure planning and programs questions, and those are weighted slightly differently. And those are identified in that application, but those also add to 100 points. One thing to note when you're looking at our application on the left, this is an example of our evaluation scoring criteria on the right. The project need -1 question is identified for the need for safety and improvements, as you can see on the left-hand side. That matches directly in the capital scoring rubric to the PN1 need for safety and improvement enhancements. And as we mentioned, walks you through how to receive the maximum amount of points. So when you're reviewing each question, please make sure to address each part of those questions to make sure you can get full points. So for instance, we've tried to lay this out and modify the application a little bit differently to hopefully walk you through each of those questions a little bit better to help make that a little clearer. So you'll be looking at things both in a checkbox format and in a fill in the blank format. And most of those things should be linked in there or reference other things you'll be putting together. So like I mentioned, both the capital and the non-infrastructure planning and programs scoring rubrics are available on the Call for Projects webpage. So I won't go through all of these in complete detail, but these are just some examples of the questions that will be in the applications that address each of the criteria under each of those 5 main categories. So for need, we have how does the project accommodate multiple transportation modes? Are you serving transportation, recreation, or both types of uses? What are the safety improvements and enhancements needed, and why are they needed? Is your project recommended in an adopted state, regional, or other local planning or programming effort? And then the effectiveness of your project. How effectiveness will your proposed project be? Are you enhancing first last mile connections, increasing person throughput and mode share, reducing stress, closing gaps in the network, providing a high impact, low cost project? So we will be looking for explanations on how you are helping to reduce the cost on your project, and if there are any alternatives, and if you did need to choose a higher cost option, why was that necessary, and what's the justification for that? So all things, we understand that sometimes the higher cost projects are needed, so we'll just need documentation for that as well. BMT, GHG reduction impacts, travel time savings are all there. The last 3 categories look at sustainability and vulnerable populations, environmental impacts, green infrastructure, how are you accounting for maintenance and long-term operations, and economic activities that may come out from your project. The last 2, readiness, it's all about your clear and complete proposal, what your status and schedule look like, how easy it is to implement the project, if there are any right-of-way takes or needs, and then what level of community support, community engagement have you done in the past to identify the project, and what kind of community support will you do as part of the project to continually involve the community as each project progresses. And then do you have a credible cost estimate and funding plan? And funding leverage, what kind of matching funds you're using, and are there any private sector funds? So remember that the TA considers things like developer impact fees to be private sector contributions. So make sure to label those as such. And if you have questions when you're filling it out on what is or is not a private sector contribution, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And then lastly, for our schedule, and then we'll open it up to some questions, and then I can walk through some of the forms, as my dog likes to bark and growl at people outside. So we kicked this off this last week on August 4th. We're hosting our workshop today. The notice of intent to submit survey deadline is August 19th if you want the pre-submittal meeting. Then we'll be hosting those pre-submittal meetings with TA staff from August 22nd to September 2nd. And then project applications are due September 23rd. If you only want or need a upload link, we just need your notice of intent to submit survey by September 16th. So that's in the guidelines as well. So you have a little extra time to do that. But we did need to do a cutoff date for the pre-submittal meetings. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be hosting our evaluation period during the month of October with our evaluation committee and presenting the draft program awards to our Citizens Advisory Committee on November 1st, and then the board on the 3rd, and then we'll be bringing those final recommendations back to those to that committee and to the TA board in December for adoption. And with that, all our materials are available on our Call for Projects website, and then feel free to reach out to myself or Jennifer Williams as well. With that, I can stop sharing for a sec and we can see if there are any questions.
Hey, Patrick, this is Ray Razavi with Half Moon Bay.
Yeah.
Just a quick question for the notice of intent, and we'll file it by August 19th. And do you need a lot of documentation for that, or is it pretty straightforward?
Good question. While you are talking, I can bring it up. So it is available. So first step, if you go to our TA website, for those who don't know, under the What's Happening column, we have our Call for Projects labeled there. This has all of our program information for each Call for Projects that's there. And so under the Pedestrian and Bicycle program, we have the link to the Cycle 6 Call for Project page. So this has all the information we've presented today. So if we click on this link on the Notice of Intent to Submit survey, it takes you to this survey. So all we're looking for, and we won't hold you to the data you input in here if it changes by the time you input this and by the time you submit your application. So we're just looking for things like who is the eligible sponsor or the implementing agency, your contact information, a very brief project description and location so we know what we're talking about and what level of funding you're looking at applying for, and then what bucket of the project you think it will apply for. And then if you're looking for the standard match or equity-based reduced match, so we can make sure to look up that information ahead of time as well. And then if you're interested in any type of TA technical assistance, so either use of the TA planning or engineering on calls or help with implementation of your project. This will just help make sure that we bring the right people to that conversation. And then if you're interested in the pre-submittal meeting, please make sure to indicate that at the very end. If you missed the August 19th deadline, please just email me specifically and I'm happy to answer questions.
So Patrick, for the match, if you have funding from other grants, does that include as a match, or is it just the
it can be included as a match as long as it's not TA funds.
Okay, so no TA funds. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Very good. And what is the division on this? Do you guys want to get a lot of, I mean, how do you split it between small, medium, and large projects? Is it just equal?
We have a different breakdown. So I think it's 33% of our capital funds go to, let's see, I go back to the funding one. So 33% of our capital project funds go to small capital projects. So those under $1 million is about 5.5 million that we have available for those. So we can fund about 5.5 projects, assuming not all come in at $1 million directly. And then we have about $11 million for large capital projects as well. So
Okay. And this is a total cost of the project, not what you're asking for.
this is what you're asking for. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're asking, let's say for 600,000, but the project cost is 1.5 million, it would fall under the small.
If the request plus your match is less than 1 million, then you fall in the small capital bucket.
Okay, the match. Okay, got it.
So both
Okay,
of those need to equal less than 1 million.
Okay, because we have a project that's like 1.3 million, and we have from that 1.3 million, we short about, let's say, 600,000. So we're putting in 700. However, that 700, 350 out of that is the TA funding.
Yeah, so if you're requesting 700 and you can fill in as much match up to the $1 million, and then you can fall in the small capital project bucket, or you'll roll over into the large project bucket.
I see. Okay. All right. I guess we could talk about that when we have the meeting with you guys, because it seems a little complicated.
Yes, we have lots of guidelines, so that's why we're always here to help.
Thank you. No, you guys are great. You guys helped us out a lot. Appreciate that.
No problem.
The coast really appreciates you guys' support.
We're
Thank
happy
you.
to help. Yeah, the other thing I'll mention too is we may have a few other projects that will be closing out, so we may be able to add some additional funds to this, but we won't know that for a few more months. So there is a possibility that we will be able to increase our total available funds from 17 million up to maybe 19.5 million. So fingers crossed about that too.
Thank you. So for construction, how much time do we have to complete it? Did you say 2 years or?
You have 3 years for construction, but if you have any pre-construction activities with that as well, then you can have up to 5 years.
Up to 5 years. Okay, so 3 years to complete construction. Okay. All right, we're pretty much ready to break ground. So all we need is your checkbook, Patrick.
That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions in the chat. One from Malahat from Roadwood City. How recent is your on-call list? So our general engineering on-call list was just approved, I believe, earlier this year. And then our planning or transportation planning on-call has been, I think, 2 or 3 years now. That's with WSP and Stantec. There's also a few different firms under those as well. And then we can provide more information on the engineering on-call if you need that too. And it looks like we have another question. Will the sponsoring agency take on any liability when sponsoring another entity if they don't meet project delivery requirements? And then will there be any courtesy application review before the submittal date? If you have specific questions related to the application, we can answer those on a one-off basis, but we won't be doing full application review. There's just too many applications that potentially will come and not enough staff time for that. And then sponsoring agency take on any liability. There is roles and responsibilities in those either three-party agreements or three-party memorandum of understanding that can shift those as well. So those we can work with both your legal team and our legal team on making sure that's appropriate. And then Nicolette Chan from City of San Mateo asked, can videos of existing conditions be submitted in addition to site photos? I don't see why not. We haven't had that done before, but yeah, that should be fine. Let's see. Seeing no immediate other questions, I will quickly walk through the call for projects portal. So in the application instructions links you to this FMCTA call for projects portal. When you get here, it will automatically populate a new application ID for you. Please make sure to write this down. You can insert this again and come back to it if you need to. Otherwise, it will automatically generate that as well. Or if you do one project and get through the end, you just hit new project here and it will start you over with a new application ID. So I'll do an example. Project agency, put your information here. to begin your application. And then it'll take you to this next step. It'll show all of San Mateo County. What you'll do first is select the type of project you're looking at on the left. So is it a spot improvement? So think of these in terms of, is it a point, is it a line, or is it an area kind of programmatic improvement? So spot improvements will be the point, corridor improvements will be the line, and programmatic improvements will be larger areas or citywide activities. So spot improvements can be anything from an RFB crossing to an improvement at an intersection, things like that. Corridor improvements are things like if you have multiple intersections along one street, that would justify it as a corridor. So please draw it from the first intersection improvement to the last, even if there are no specific treatments between them. Or if you have specific treatments along a street, please do them there. And programmatic will cover a larger area. So if you have some multiple streets, use the programmatic feature to draw around those as well. So we're looking for only one of these to be selected and only one point line or area to be drawn. So for this example, I will do corridor improvement, and it will then give you some instructions on what we're actually looking for when you draw that and how to start it. So step one is using your mouse or touch screen. You'll left click on it and then begin your trip. You'll then draw around kind of the streets or area that it is looking for. So this can actually do multiple streets if you have it. If you have multiple streets that don't connect, use the other feature. And then to move your mouse while drawing, you'll hold down your left button on your mouse and move the mouse to get to your desired location. Drag and drop. And then to delete your last post, click delete the last point if you need to. And then to finish drawing, make sure you hit finish drawing. So once you do that, you can say, got it. I will pick something general just right outside our main building. So say we were looking at San Carlos Avenue for a potential project there. You could draw the line there and then click the line to finish it. It'll ask you for a few details, and these will just be connected to the file that will export. So you can say, San Carlos Ave Bikeway, the project type. So these will apply to which type of program you're looking at. Remember, this is a general call for projects input tool. So please make sure to select if you are doing a ped bike infrastructure project, if you're looking at a planning effort, or if you're looking at a programmatic effort. So this example can be that. And then feel free, if you want, to just implement or incorporate any minor descriptions of what it is. So if it's a class 4 bikeway intersection upgrade. No need to add all 500 characters for that. And then you'll just hit save. And once you hit that, you can hit save and export. And then it'll save a shapefile. And then you'll just take that shapefile and you can rename it with the project ID you got at the beginning and make sure that is included as one of your attachments. So the other thing to do that we mentioned is the California Air Resources Board page. So this is in the application instructions that we'll download. You'll just make sure we tell you specifically in those which boxes you'll need to fill in. So you'll just be looking at things like filling in the county information and project area type. And you'll only need to fill in the active transportation inputs page that'll walk you through what type of improvement it is. So this does not cover everything in the realm of active transportation improvements. So if you were looking at something like a specific intersection crossing improvement, that might not be captured here, but you could do, depending on what facilities you were connecting through the intersection, class 2 bikeway, and then just draw the distance through the intersection, or similarly for pedestrian improvement. If you can't find anything that works, you don't need to just make sure to include this and then show that nothing is applicable. So let's say we're doing a class 2 bikeway. You'll name the location. You'll put in a first year. In general, it's either 1 mile or less, 1 to 2 miles. So let's say it's less than 1 mile. We have 6,000 ADT on the adjacent roadway. We're not in a university town. And the key destinations, you'll need to kind of gauge this by looking at your map and counting those. So say there's 15 within a mile and 35 within that, and then it'll automatically export this one. It's not doing that because I didn't fill in the area type of the county. So reasons if you don't get both numbers, make sure you come to this one and make sure that all of these are filled in. Like that. So you'll get your GHG reduction emissions from that improvement and your passenger VMT reduction. So this just helps us make sure that all things are done equally across the board. And with that, I can stop sharing and double check if there are any other questions. Looks like there's one more that's come into the chat. Are there any limitations on how many projects the TA will take on as an implementing agency? If so, what is the basis on selection of which project to give that support to? That's a great question. Yes, we will not take on every project. Potentially, we have guidance in our TA strategic plan that helps tell us which projects we should be taking on. In general, there should either be some level of countywide significance to the project, a need for larger coordination between multiple agencies, or if you can prove that you don't have the staff availability or time or expertise to help take on that project. So that's when the TA could potentially take on that project on your behalf. It is our expectation that the city or the town or the county involved in that still have someone actively working on that as well, in tandem with our project managers who will help. And then use of our on-calls is also available without any TA technical assistance as well, if that's something you're interested in to help with procurement processing. And or I believe CAGs can be used for that as well. All right. Seeing no other immediate questions, either feel free to raise your hand or stick around for a few minutes. I'm happy to chat now, or we can please fill out the notice of intent to submit survey on our CFP webpage, and then we look forward to hearing from you. So I will quickly drop this in the chat, just to make sure that everyone has the link easily accessible. And then, yeah, thank you all for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to your project submission. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Rick.
I'll fill one out and send it over to you for the notice of intent tomorrow.
Perfect.
Look forward to it.